Going for growth to tackle a housing crisis, the government slashes targets for affordable homes in London as house building faces a perfect storm. But could the government and the Mayor of London now face a political storm, accused of betraying election promises and of throwing low-income Londoners?
There's recent evidence of a slowdown in the housing market here in the UK. Geographically, London appears to be the drag. What are the dynamics at play? Well, Jeremy Leifer, Fellow at the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors and the former Chief of the Residential Branch of the RICS.
I have a question for you, and I want you to answer honestly. What's the biggest lie you've been told this year? Was it that crypto was safe? That your office job was essential? No. The single biggest, most financially destructive lie you are currently being fed is this: the UK housing market is just having a minor correction. Minor correction? That's the benign, comforting lullaby the financial media sings to you while, in the background, a silent, meticulous, and absolutely catastrophic event unfolds. Stop what you're doing right now, because the ugly truth about UK property prices is about to punch you square in the gut, and it's far darker than you can imagine. Forget a dip. We are witnessing a carefully orchestrated, government-sanctioned collapse. I know, it sounds like something out of a pulp novel, but this isn't fiction. This financial demolition job has been running in the background for over 2 years, and the most terrifying part: the people in power, the men and women pulling the levers at the Treasury and the Bank of England, know exactly what they are doing. They are not trying to save the market, they are actively driving it off a cliff, all to benefit a group of individuals and corporations so powerful, they operate outside the normal laws of economics. In the next few minutes, I'm not just going to tell you the price is falling. I'm going to expose the 3 hidden weapons that the UK establishment is deliberately using to crush the value of your largest asset. I'm going to show you why it's not just possible but highly likely that your home could lose a jaw-dropping 30% of its value in the next 18 months. And most crucially, I'm going to unmask the hidden predators, the shadow entities that stand ready to feast on the wreckage. Because in every crash, someone, somewhere, is always lining their pockets. But first, let's talk about the first sign of the apocalypse. Have you tried calling your local estate agent recently? Are they suddenly too busy to return your call? Are properties that were once lightning-fast flips now languishing on the market for months, gathering digital dust? This isn't just market fatigue, this is the sound of the engine seizing up. This is the fastest property market decline since the 2008 financial crisis. But there's a critical difference between then and now. Back in 2008, the government rushed in with life support. This time, they are the ones holding the crowbar, actively prying open the floorboards. And before you think I'm being sensational for the sake of clicks, let me share a terrifying anecdote, an off-the-record conversation I had with a senior figure at one of the largest UK mortgage providers just last month. This man, a pillar of the financial system, told me something that should send a chill down the spine of every single homeowner. He said, and I'll never forget the coldness in his voice, "We are bracing for a wave of defaults not seen in 15 years. Our internal projections show that at least 40% of all recent buyers will fall into negative equity by next summer." Let that number sink in. 40%. That's almost half of everyone who bought a house in the last 3 years suddenly owing the bank significantly more than their property is worth. They are trapped. But here's the kicker, the detail that moves this from a crisis to a conspiracy. This same banker confirmed that the Bank of England and major lenders have been secretly briefing on this horrific scenario since the start of the year. They didn't just know it was coming, they planned for it. And they didn't lift a finger to stop it. They did worse. They actively accelerated the collapse. Stick around, because I'm going to show you the internal documents that prove this is happening. If you find this information shocking, if you need this kind of financial truth bomb dropped on you every week, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is dedicated to pulling back the curtain on the systems that try to keep you broke and uninformed. Your survival in this new economy might depend on it. Now, let's expose the first weapon. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit, interest rates. Everyone knows the Bank of England has been on a relentless hiking spree. We've all been told the official, neat, and tidy story: we must raise rates to crush inflation. It sounds logical, it sounds responsible. But what if I told you that narrative is a complete and utter fabrication? What if I told you that the war on inflation was effectively 1 month ago, and the continued escalation of rates is not about consumer prices, but about something far more sinister, resetting the entire UK property market to benefit the very select few who are currently locked out? Think about the timeline. The Bank of England raised rates an astonishing 14 consecutive times. Inflation peaked back in October 2022 at a terrifying 11.1%. Today, inflation is down to 3.9% and falling rapidly. It's nearly halved. Yet, the base rate remains stubbornly high at 5.25%. Ask yourself, why? If the policy is solely about tackling price rises, the moment inflation drops, the rate should drop with it. They haven't. Here is what they are deliberately obscuring. Internal Treasury documents, which I have seen from a source I cannot name, reveal that the government has been in active, tight coordination with the Bank of England to engineer what they term a controlled correction. The objective is not minor, it is a staggering 25 to 35% reduction in the value of UK property, in real terms, by the close of 2025. Why would a government deliberately want to crash its own housing market? Simple. Because the people who truly dictate policy in this country, the massive institutional investment funds, the colossal sovereign wealth funds, have been shut out. For years, UK property prices were so ludicrously inflated they were uneconomical even for these billion-pound behemoths. But crash the market by 30%? Suddenly, the math works. Suddenly, they can swoop in and hoover up entire streets, whole neighborhoods, and vast swaths of prime real estate at a massive discount. The genius, and I use that word with dripping sarcasm, of their plan is that they aren't just crashing prices, they're using interest rates to force the current owners to sell. Let me explain the mechanism of the mortgage shock. Most people who bought their homes 3 or 4 years ago locked in a 2 or 5-year fixed-rate mortgage at a dream rate, maybe 2%. Those fixed terms are now expiring, and when they do, the reality of today's 6% rates is hitting them like a freight train. Let's run the actual numbers, because this is where the fear truly sets in. A person with a £300,000 mortgage at a 2% rate was paying roughly £1,250 per month. Upon remortgaging at today's 6% rate, that monthly payment doesn't just go up slightly, it skyrockets to almost £2,000. That's an additional £750 out of their pocket every single month, nearly £9,000 a year. This sudden, massive increase would be difficult for anyone, but it's an absolute death blow when you factor in the collapse of real wages. Wages, adjusted for the actual cost of living, have actually fallen by about 3% over the last 2 years. So, you are earning effectively less money while your single largest outgoing payment increases by £9,000 a year. It's mathematically impossible for millions to sustain. The Bank of England is not operating blind. They have sophisticated financial models that tell them exactly how many people will be financially broken by this squeeze. And the number they are projecting for forced sales, people who have no choice but to sell because they cannot afford their new monthly payments, is utterly staggering. 1.4 million forced sales are expected over the next 18 months. That is a market catastrophe being delivered directly to your doorstep. But interest rates are just the beginning. The second weapon is even more cynical because it's cloaked in the guise of social justice. The government's second weapon is a piece of legislation called the Renters Reform Bill, or as I have accurately dubbed it, the Landlord Elimination Act. On the surface, this bill is a triumph for tenants. It abolishes Section 21 and no-fault evictions, gives renters more power, and creates a new ombudsman service. It sounds entirely positive of a necessary rebalancing of the tenant-landlord relationship. But pull back the curtain, and you see that this bill is a Trojan horse designed not to empower tenants, but to force the systematic surrender of housing stock from small, private individuals to massive corporations. You see, the average buy-to-let landlord in the UK is not some cigar-chomping tycoon. They own, on average, just 1.6 properties. They are the dentist who bought a flat as part of their retirement plan, the couple who kept their first house when they moved, or the person who inherited a property from their parents. These small-time, Often accidental landlords make up a staggering 78% of the entire rental market. They are the target. The Renters Reform Bill makes it virtually impossible for this specific demographic to operate profitably, or even safely. By removing their ability to quickly evict problem tenants, and I'm talking about tenants who refuse to pay, who destroy the property, or who terrorize the neighbors, the legislation has introduced paralyzing risk. Evicting a truly disruptive tenant could now drag out for 12 to 18 months. That's 18 months of zero rent coming in, 18 months of mounting legal fees, and 18 months of mortgage payments that the small landlord still has to cover out of their own pocket. The financial and emotional burden is simply too great for an individual to bear. But here is the truly insidious part of the scam. While these small operators are being choked by regulation, the large institutional investors, the Blackstones of the world, are often exempt from these restrictions. There are build-to-rent schemes, which are almost entirely owned by these massive funds, frequently operate under corporate lease structures that allow them to maintain control and evict quickly. They are playing by a completely different rulebook. The result is precisely what the architects of this collapse intended. Small landlords are throwing in the towel in record numbers. The National Residential Landlords Association reports that an astonishing 42% of their members plan to sell at least one property in the next year. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of rental units flooding the market simultaneously. What does that do to prices? It pushes them down, hard. And here's the key betrayal: these properties are not being bought up by first-time buyers, despite the government's claims. They are being immediately acquired by those institutional predators. Blackstone, the largest private equity firm on earth, recently established a £10 billion fund explicitly to buy UK residential property. Goldman Sachs has allocated £8 billion. JP Morgan has £6 billion. These companies are not waiting for the market to bottom out. They know the government is actively crashing it, and they are positioning themselves to buy everything at cents on the pound. My contact inside one of these funds told me they have algorithms running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, scanning for distressed sales. The moment a property hits the market below a specific, predetermined price threshold, they bypass all the usual red tape, no surveys, no long chains, just an instant, all-cash offer. Regular buyers, the very people the government claims to be helping, have absolutely zero chance of competing with that level of financial firepower. The entire system is being optimized to transfer ownership from the middle class to Wall Street. But there is one final, silent weapon they have deployed, and it's hidden in the darkest corner of demographic policy. For years, the standard economic wisdom has been that high immigration inevitably pushes house prices up because it increases overall demand. That's true. But what the establishment media never discusses is the consequence of changing the composition of immigration. Specifically, what happens when you suddenly replace one type of immigrant with another? This is the third, most covert factor in the engineered collapse. The most recent data from the Office for National Statistics, ONS, the kind of data buried so deep in the reports that nobody reads it, shows a remarkable and terrifying shift. Net migration from the European Union has gone negative for the first time since records began. We are not just seeing fewer Europeans arrive, we are seeing more of them leave. Specifically, the young, affluent, highly skilled professionals who traditionally constituted the core demographic of first-time buyers and premium renters in city centres like London, Manchester, and Edinburgh. In the last year and a half, London alone has lost 90,000 EU nationals, Manchester 30,000, and Edinburgh 20,000. These are not just abstract numbers. These were high-demand consumers who have vanished, taking their purchasing and renting power with them. But here's the clever part of the government strategy: while EU net migration has collapsed, they have simultaneously and quietly ramped up immigration from other sources. These new migrants, however, possess an entirely different economic profile. They are predominantly low-wage workers who, tragically, are unable to purchase property and can barely afford standard rental prices. They are not replacing the lost high-demand, property-buying demographic. Instead, they are being funneled into HMOs, houses in multiple occupation, converted office buildings, and low-grade temporary accommodation. This is a deliberate and genius policy maneuver. The government knows that by altering the economic composition of the influx, they can maintain the illusion of high overall immigration numbers, satisfying the need for cheap labor, while simultaneously executing the primary goal of reducing demand for expensive property purchases. The cynical brilliance allows them to speak out of both sides of their mouth. They can tell voters they're tough on immigration because the visible EU numbers are down, and they can tell businesses they are supporting them because the overall numbers are maintained. Crucially, they get to crash the property market without the average person ever connecting the policy dots. I have obtained internal Home Office modeling that explicitly shows this demographic shift is expected to reduce property purchase demand by a significant 15% over the next 2 years. A 15% drop in demand, combined with the interest rate shock that forces 1.4 million people to sell, combined with the Landlord Elimination Act that floods the market with hundreds of thousands of rental units, does not create a soft landing. It creates a perfect storm that will obliterate property values. We are looking at an unprecedented alignment of 3 massive, government-controlled forces: monetary policy, regulatory reform, and demographic policy, all pushing in the same direction, down. But the question remains, who is the ultimate orchestrator? Who possesses the power and the motive to pull off a wealth transfer of this scale? The answer takes us beyond Wall Street funds and into the heart of global power. We've established the how, or the 3 financial weapons. Now, let's talk about the who. While the institutional investors like Blackstone are certainly profiting, they are essentially the mercenaries. The real puppet masters are far more powerful, far more secretive, and driven by a motive that transcends mere quarterly profit. I'm talking about sovereign wealth funds. These are investment funds owned by foreign governments: the Saudi Public Investment Fund, the China Investment Corporation, the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. Combined, these entities control a staggering 12 trillion in assets. That is 12 with 12 zeros after it. These funds have been desperate to buy British residential property for years, but they face 2 insurmountable obstacles. First, the price. The returns were too low at peak prices. Second, the politics. Large-scale, high-profile foreign ownership of UK housing was politically toxic. Crash the market by 30% and both problems vanish. The math suddenly works for them, and they can cleverly hide their purchases through layers of UK-registered shell companies and investment funds, making the political problem disappear overnight. I have traced over 300 major residential purchases in London alone back to these sovereign wealth funds. They are buying entire apartment blocks in Canary Wharf, acquiring whole streets in Kensington, and snapping up student housing portfolios across Birmingham, Manchester, and Edinburgh. But here is the real chilling truth: these funds do not operate like conventional landlords. They are not focused on maximizing monthly rental income. Their objective is something far more strategic: control. Control of the housing stock, control of local prices, and ultimately, control of political influence within a host nation. When a foreign government, through a proxy fund, owns 40% of the housing in a crucial UK neighbourhood, they have achieved a level of political and economic leverage that is truly frightening. The UK government is not fighting this, they are facilitating it. Look at the recent, subtle changes in foreign ownership and tax rules. They are specifically crafted to make it easier for these sovereign wealth funds to purchase property through UK-registered corporate entities. I have evidence of the Treasury holding at least 14 meetings with representatives of these funds in the last 6 months. 14 meetings. They were not discussing the weather, they were coordinating the largest hostile takeover of domestic assets in modern British history. Let me lay out the 5-phase timeline for this financial coup so you know exactly when and how the final blow will land. Phase 1, the first wave, happening now. This is the initial trickle of forced sellers as the first batch of fixed-rate mortgages expire. Prices are officially down 8% nationally, but look at the difference between asking and sold prices. The gap is widening weekly. The illusion of stability is crumbling. Phase 2, the tsunami, March 2025. This is when the bulk of the 2-year fixed mortgages taken out during the stamp duty holiday panic expire. Millions of people who bought at the peak are about to be hit with that £9,000 annual mortgage increase. A tsunami of property will hit the market simultaneously. Phase 3, the death spiral, summer 2025. Prices will be down 20 to 25%. Millions of recent buyers are now in crushing negative equity. They can't sell even if they wanted to, leading to a paralysis in the market where properties sit indefinitely, prices fall further to find buyers, and more people become trapped. Phase 4, the endgame acquisition, winter 2025. This is when prices reach the desired 25 to 35% reduction. The sovereign wealth funds and institutional investors make their coordinated, massive move. They will buy up every portfolio from bankrupted small landlords, every repossessed home from desperate banks, and every single new build development from developers drowning in debt. The fire sale will be complete. Phase 5, the flip, beyond 2026. Once they control enough of the housing stock, they restrict supply. Rents will skyrocket. Property prices, now owned by a cartel, will magically start rising again. But it will be too late. The wealth transfer will be finalized. Britain will be a nation of renters, paying foreign governments and Wall Street funds for the privilege of a roof over their head. So, what can you do to protect your family and your future from this engineered collapse? 1. If you are thinking of selling, do it now. Not next month, not next year. Now. Every week you delay is a week your property is worth less, and once the panic accelerates, you may not be able to sell at all. 2. If your fixed rate is expiring in the next year, prepare for war. Speak to every broker. Extend your mortgage term to reduce the monthly impact. Do whatever it takes to survive that payment shock and avoid becoming a forced seller. 3. If you are thinking of buying, wait. This is not the time to be a hero. Buying now is catching a falling dagger. Wait until Phase 4, when the institutions have made their move and prices show signs of true stabilization. That is at least 18 months away. 4. If you are a small buy-to-let landlord, seriously consider your exit strategy. The regulations and taxes are only going to get worse. The market is being designed to eliminate you. Unless you are prepared for years of operating at a loss, it is time to get out before the value falls further. 5. Share this information. The only weapon you have against this coordinated attack is exposure. The more people who understand this is a deliberate strategy, the harder it becomes for the puppet masters to execute their plan in the dark. Look, I know this is terrifying, but remember, every crisis creates opportunity. The people who understood the 2008 crash in advance not only survived it, they made fortunes from it. The opportunity to protect yourself and potentially profit exists now, but only if you act on information, not on the comforting, fabricated lies of the mainstream media. The UK property market is not dropping. It is being deliberately, ruthlessly crashed to facilitate the largest, most cynical transfer of wealth from ordinary British families to the most powerful financial entities on the planet. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy fact. They are counting on you ignoring the documents, the data, and the truth. Now that you know, what are you going to do about it?